At the age of 41, Obafemi Martins has achieved what millions of Lagos street kids only dream about. Serie A titles, Champions League nights, Premier League crowds chanting his name, MLS history made, Nigeria represented with pride on the world's biggest stages, the somersault celebrations, the wind-tearing sprints, the iconic number 9 jersey. From dusty Nigerian streets to the lights of San Siro, he conquered it all. But strip away the trophies, and you find something the highlight reels deliberately skipped. Silent grief that never healed, pressure that never lifted. A price nobody warned him about. This is that story. This is not a story about goals. It is a story about what goals cost. In the narrow, noise-choked streets where young Obafemi grew up, poverty was not a circumstance. It was an atmosphere. You breathed it in every morning. Children woke up without knowing if there would be food by evening. Parents worked themselves to exhaustion and still came up short. Hope was a luxury most families could not afford. But Obafemi Martins had something dangerous: speed. Not just physical speed, though that would one day terrorize the best defenders in Europe, but a desperate, burning urgency to get out. He played football on potholed streets with torn balls under a sun that showed no mercy. And he played like a boy being chased by his own future, because he was... Every year, the faces around him thinned. Boys who had laughed with him on the field disappeared into dead-end work, into wrong crowds, into lives the city had already decided for them. Martins watched them go one by one, and something hardened inside him. Not bitterness, something sharper. Terror. He was terrified of becoming one of them. That fear did not paralyze him. It launched him. While others slept, he trained. While others accepted the life Lagos handed them, he sprinted against it, sometimes literally, racing through alleyways at full speed as if practicing for an escape he hadn't yet been offered. Then the offer came. When scouts from FC Ibadan noticed the teenager who moved like lightning on a dirt pitch, and word reached Inter Milan, the neighborhood erupted in pride. Relatives gathered, eyes glistened. The message was unmistakable. You are our way out. All of us. He was still a boy. He barely understood what he was carrying. The day Martins boarded a plane to Italy, he was not just leaving Lagos, he was leaving his entire world. His mother's voice, the smell of familiar streets, the only life he had ever known. When the plane lifted off Nigerian soil, something else lifted with it, his childhood. He would never fully get it back. Italy was another planet. He could not speak the language. He could not understand the culture. He sat in locker rooms surrounded by laughter and conversation he couldn't access, visible but invisible, present but profoundly alone. After training sessions, when the noise died down, the loneliness descended like a physical weight. There were no video calls in those days, no quick messages home. Just a boy in a foreign bedroom, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was strong enough. He almost wasn't. But every time the doubt rose, he reached for the same thing. His family's faces on the day he left. The hope in their eyes, the unspoken deal he had made with all of them. I will not come back empty-handed. That promise kept him vertical when everything else wanted to bring him down. He learned Italian in fragments. He adapted in inches. He trained with a ferocity that unnerved coaches who had seen hundreds of talented youngsters. They noticed something in him that couldn't be drilled or designed. A hunger that went beyond football. Martins wasn't playing for a contract. He was playing for survival, and then suddenly he was playing for Inter Milan. When Martins broke into Inter's first team, the world discovered what Lagos had known for years. This man was different. His speed was not merely athletic, it was violent. In the blink of an eye, he could turn a half-chance into a breakaway, a tight angle into a goal, a comfortable defensive line into sheer panic. Defenders who prided themselves on reading the game simply could not read something that moved that fast. The goals came quickly. The headlines followed. Soon, millions of people who had never heard of his neighborhood in Lagos were chanting his name under the lights of the San Siro. And then came the celebrations. Every time Martins scored, he launched himself into a reverse somersault, a burst of pure, uncontained joy that became his signature. Fans didn't just watch for the goals. They stayed for that moment, the leap, The spin, the landing, as if his body was releasing everything it had been holding, the poverty, the loneliness, the pressure, in one single athletic exhale. He won Serie A. He won Coppa Italia. He scored in the Champions League. He wore the Nigeria jersey with pride and scored 18 international goals. From the outside, the story looked perfect. From the inside, something else was building. The more famous he became, the less safe he felt. Success, it turned out, was not an arrival. It was an accelerating treadmill. Every season demanded more. Every goal raised the expectation for the next one. Fans who loved him on Tuesday could turn on him by Sunday. He had worked his whole life to escape the fear of losing everything. Now that he had something to lose, the fear was worse than ever. He smiled for cameras. He celebrated for crowds. He gave what everyone needed to see. But behind closed doors, Obafemi Martins was a man drowning quietly in expectations he could never fully meet. Not because of lack of talent, but because no single human being could carry the weight of an entire nation's hope. In 2006, he moved to Newcastle United. It was framed as a transfer. It felt like another departure. Leaving Inter meant leaving the city where he had first built something resembling a home away from home. It meant packing up again, saying goodbye again, starting over again. Newcastle loved him. His speed, his spirit, his refusal to be anything less than total, and he loved them back. But just as he began to belong, the cycle repeated. Germany, Russia, Spain, America, China, country after country, language after language, club after club. To the outside world, this looked like a rich international career. To Martins, it was a relentless series of farewells. Every city he mastered, he had to abandon. Every group of teammates who became family, he had to leave behind. Friendships forged in the intensity of shared seasons, the early morning training sessions, the last-minute goals, the post-match silences after defeat dissolved into occasional messages that grew rarer every year. He belonged everywhere, he belonged nowhere, and no matter how many countries he lived in, something in him never left Lagos. He carried Nigeria everywhere he went, not just in his passport, but in the person he was. The boy who had once been terrified of poverty never disappeared. He simply learned to wear a different face in public. In 2011, life stopped. Obafemi's older brother, Oladipupo Martins, died suddenly. There are no words adequate to describe what that meant. Oladipupo was not just family, he was a connection to everything that had come before the fame, before the money, before the world knew the name Martins. He was the streets of Lagos, the shared childhood, the living proof that the dream had once belonged to both of them. Gone without warning, without a second chance, Martins had faced many hard moments in football: pressure, criticism, injury, failure. But he had always found a way through because he believed hard work could solve most things. Speed could outrun most problems, willpower could outlast most pain. This was different. No sprint was fast enough, no contract was large enough, no title in any league on any continent could fill the space his brother left behind. For the first time in his life, Martins was helpless, and that helplessness cracked something open in him that never fully closed again. He kept playing. He kept training. He kept moving. Because what else do you do when you have people depending on you and grief threatening to swallow you whole? You do what you were always taught to do in Lagos. You keep running forward, even when your legs don't want to carry you anymore. But he was quieter after that, more reserved, less visible in the media. Some losses don't destroy a person, they transform them. And Oladipo's death transformed Obafemi Martins into someone who understood, at the deepest possible level, that no amount of success protects you from suffering. Speed was his gift. Speed was his identity. And speed, like everything beautiful, was borrowed. It started subtly muscles that took longer to recover. Mornings where his body felt heavier than it should. Defenders who used to trail helplessly now keeping pace. For most players, a small drop in pace is an inconvenience. For Martins, it was an existential crisis. His entire football life had been built on one premise: he was faster than you, and you couldn't fix that. Now he saw gaps and his legs hesitated. He felt the instinct fire and the body slow, that fraction of a second delay, invisible to most spectators. was enormous to him. The weapon that had carried him from Lagos to Milan, from poverty to glory, was no longer fully in his control. Injuries came more frequently. Hamstrings, knees, muscles that had once seemed indestructible now needed coaxing, managing, protecting. He trained harder, not to get faster, but just to stay functional. And late at night, in hotel rooms across continents, a new fear replaced the old one. Not the fear of poverty, not the fear of failure, the fear of irrelevance, of becoming a ghost of the player he used to be, recognized only in highlight reels from a decade ago. Then, unexpectedly, America gave him something he had almost forgotten how to receive: joy. When Martins joined Seattle Sounders in 2013, many observers dismissed it as a comfortable win down. They were wrong. Seattle didn't get the Martins of 2004. They got something arguably more valuable, the Martins who had been through everything, survived everything, and still wanted to compete. From his first weeks, the difference was visible, not in his legs, but in his face. He smiled. He played with a lightness that years of European pressure had almost extinguished. Seattle fans, who had no complicated history with him, no expectations built from a decade of hype, loved him simply for what he gave them on the field. And he gave them a great deal. Goals came, titles came. He was voted into the MLS Best XI, but more than the individual honors, he helped Seattle become a genuine force, a team that fought and won and mattered. Children in Seattle wore his number. Fans chanted his name with the same rawness he had once heard in Milan. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't known he still needed it. For the first time in years, Martins understood that his value had not expired. It had simply evolved. He was no longer the unstoppable sprinter. He was something harder to quantify: a leader, a finisher, a man whose mere presence on the field communicated to younger teammates what sustained excellence actually looked like. Every goal he scored in Seattle felt like a small act of defiance against time itself. But time, as always, was patient. At 41, Obafemi Martins no longer dominates back pages. The debates about his pace, his form, his best years, they have moved on to other names, other faces. The world tends to forget yesterday's heroes efficiently. New records erase old ones. New faces fill old spaces. The somersault celebrations exist now only in clips shared by fans, who are themselves growing older, remembering a player who once made them believe that football could be pure electricity. But here is what cannot be reduced to statistics or erased by time. He was a boy from Lagos who had every reason to fail and chose not to. He carried his family's survival on his shoulders as a teenager in a foreign country. Alone. He absorbed years of pressure, criticism, and longing, and converted them into goals. He lost his brother and kept going. He watched his greatest gift, his speed, diminish with age, and adapted rather than disappeared. He found joy in Seattle when many had written him off. He became a father who wanted his son, Kevin, to inherit his resilience, not just his football instincts. His true legacy is not a trophy cabinet. It is a generation of Nigerian children who saw him and understood, not just that dreams are possible, but that the road to them is brutal, and the only answer to brutality is to keep moving. Obafemi Martins never stopped running, not on the pitch, not in life, not in his darkest moments. And that more than any goal, any title, any highlight reel is the most remarkable thing about him. Because in the end, the greatest victory was never the somersault, it was standing up again every single time life knocked him down.